Hello, welcome to Insights in Action with Orange 142, where we interview agency leaders and business owners to uncover the journeys, strategies, and insights that drive their success. At Orange 142, we're all about transforming brand stories into impactful digital experiences through innovative media and marketing solutions. And today I'm lucky to be joined by Ben Schwab of Geile, Leon Marketing Communications. How's it going, Ben?
Hi, yeah, no, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. Things are
Yeah.
good.
Awesome. That's great. And you're calling from St. Louis, Missouri. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, we're on the hill here in St. Louis, and we're celebrating 35 years actually. So,
As an
been
agency?
yeah, as an agency, so homebred St. Louis for a while
That's,
now.
you don't hear about too many agencies making it to 35 years. So that's quite the accomplishment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been obviously I haven't been around for that
Yeah.
entire time, but yeah, no, it's very something we're all really excited about over here.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I'd love to start just by learning a little bit more about your background, what brought you here, and also a little bit more about your agency.
Sure. Yeah. So my main background is in graphic design. I actually graduated from Missouri State University down in Springfield, where I went through their graphic design program and eventually moved back here to St. Louis, which is where I'm originally from. And my main background has always been for the last 13 years or so working for specifically branding agencies, which very much mid-sized branding agencies, which kind of led me here to Galeon back in 2016, I guess it was. So 8 or 9 years ago now. And what really attracted me to coming to Galeon was their whole kind of mentality, their strategy and approach to the work. The big thing that's kind of always attracted me to agencies like Galeon is we're really architects and builders of brands that people can believe in. And what does that mean exactly? It means we're a marketing and branding agency that while we specialize in brand development, brand refreshes, at the core of what really kind of drives what we do. Beyond that, we also are really about delivering unignorable transformational design and creative that elevates and fulfills that deeper potential inherent in any brand that we're working with. And that kind of manifests through this empathy driven approach to the work that sort of really kind of evolved or become a bigger part of our approach to the work over the last, I don't know, probably just around COVID. So maybe 5 years ago, that really came to the surface with this idea of empathy being the driving force behind what delivers impactful social, digital, video, PR, traditional print, out of home, any kind of campaign that you're running that fulfills the potential inherent in any brand. And that all kind of comes from this empathy driven approach to the work that we do, whether that's on social, digital, video, PR, traditional print or out of home, whatever the campaign is. It's acknowledging that the relationship should be put front and center, not just by understanding and connecting with customers authentically, but also how we partner with our clients and really understanding what their stresses are, what their concerns are, struggles are, what their goals are, and then making those our own and sharing them with them. There's this history, I think, of companies' relationships with their agency where it's very transactional kind of relationship. There's not necessarily that the more sociable kind of aspect to it, where our big goal is really to develop a partnership, right? We're not really about just one-off projects. We like to really develop an understanding and meet, you could say you want to put yourself in a client's shoes. We want to put ourselves in the client's brains. Basically, it's like, how do they see the world? How do they interpret the world? What matters to them? And then make that our own. Um, and that empathy driven mentality sort of pervades the approach to everything that we do.
And wow, that's really interesting. Empathy driven marketing. It's obviously central to what you guys do. And so I understand like the what behind that, but why, like, how do you guys come up with that? And why is it so central to the way that you guys work with clients?
Sure. We've always had a saying here, which is make it mean something. And that's in the work. It doesn't just mean that the work itself should have an impact, that's trackable as far as the success of any kind of campaign, but also make it meaningful to us internally, make the relationship meaningful to the people we're working with, working for. And in a bigger sense, that means something to whatever company you're doing the work for. So even internally, they can see themselves in the work. It's authentic and impactful at the same time. And that's something that's always been sort of this guiding light for the agency and the work we do. But I think it's come more to the forefront, especially after COVID. This idea of empathy was a thing that became much more prevalent, especially as people's concerns changed. very much in real time. We were all kind of in this collective situation together where we, for the first time in who knows, maybe ever, essentially the world community had a very much shared sort of experience of the world in that moment, which is a rare thing, but also kind of upended a lot of things in terms of what values people held the most important, what was the biggest concerns that they had in their lives changed, and also how they interacted with brands and how they purchased things changed. So delivering more of that dynamic kind of aspect to brands became that much more important, and being empathetic to those needs as they change became more important. And our owner, Tim Leon, actually coined this term called return on empathy, essentially. And it's this idea that being empathetic, you think, okay, it's not just about being nice or being understanding, but it's also about really understanding what those needs are of another and then using those to project yourself authentically in a way that you can really own. But then also the idea that you get returns on that by having that authenticity and having that understanding that comes across in the creative and the way you're speaking with an audience versus just speaking at an audience.
Yeah. And those returns are often outsized. And I don't think that's the reason that people should do something is to get a return on their empathy. But usually if you do, and I know you guys probably embody this super well, but you should do something because you're going to get a return on it. But oftentimes those returns on empathy seem so outsized. I love that term, return on empathy. That's really interesting. And it goes right in line with putting yourself rather than in your client's shoes, which is like traditional empathy, right? Is put yourself in somebody's shoes, but putting yourself in their brain and trying to understand how they think and how they see the world, like you said.
Like from a creative standpoint, it's one of these things that it's never really necessarily, or at least it wasn't to me, taught literally, but if
Yeah.
you get in design because maybe you like to create art, but you're interpreting or filtering the world through your own lens. And to be an effective designer or creative in this field, you have to be willing to let yourself be your client's filter, right? You have to be willing to see the world from their point of view and interpret it for them in a way that they maybe aren't capable of doing. You have to really understand them to be able to do it effectively. And that's one of the interesting things about the whole idea of being empathy driven. You look at the transactional kind of relationship that's sort of historically been the defining feature of that relationship, and acknowledging that it's good for business to treat it for what it is, which is relationships between people. And I think the acknowledgement of that is sort of what's at the core of it.
And I know that you mentioned kind of off camera that Guile Leon prioritizes ideas over ego. And in the marketing world where creativity often comes with big personalities, how do you maintain this collaborative, low ego environment? And what benefits does it bring your clients?
You could say maybe it's a Midwestern thing because it's very much like just ingrained in who we are, maybe on some level. Bigger than that, it's when you talk about an empathy driven kind of direction for the work, we kind of acknowledge that none of this is in a vacuum. None of it's for just because I wanted to make this or because of this, because of that. It's does creative work? Is it good or bad? And why is it good or bad? When you look at the work from that perspective, everybody here can kind of own a piece of the work. And we just want to do good work for our clients. So it's very much relationship centric. Again, if everything comes back to building a relationship that's meaningful, I think that's really the biggest metric for success in anything we do is elevating that relationship and making all the work more meaningful for the client, more meaningful for potential customers, and then more meaningful for us as a team that's been able to work on it and breathe and really live that brand together as a unit. I think you really have to acknowledge that the best, most effective creative endeavors of any kind are all collaborations, right? Even though people always like to put a name on something, I think that's like just inherently a human nature thing to want to put a signature on something. It's easier for people to understand something in context of this one person is responsible for all of this. Look how cool they are. But in reality, I think none of those things happen in a vacuum. They are all efforts of a collective, no matter what the assignment is, no matter what it is. The biggest, best things that we do as people are done together, and it lifts everybody up by doing that. And I think that's the work is stronger because of it. The more holes you poke in work, it's always going to make it stronger and more, resilient because again, it's going out into the world and it needs to be reflective of the world. It can't be a narrow view of it. It needs to embrace that culture that it's going out into and feel like it's a relevant part of the conversation and not just this sort of very narrow sort of view or pinpoint within it.
Yeah. And I love that approach that, hey, I'm going to as a creative at Geile, I'm going to make something that I love and I'm passionate about, and I'm going to make it with the expectation that other people are going to poke holes in it. But I know that those other people like that, this whole poking session is going to make it way better. You know what I mean? And so having that, because there's so many times where we want to protect what we've made and not have that, but having that the culture there is super important, which is awesome. And I know that Balian has a 35-year legacy of fostering partnerships over vendor relationships. And what advice would you give to companies looking to transition from viewing agencies as service providers to seeing them as true partners?
Yeah, I think the big thing is we very rarely will we ever take on any client that just, I won't say we won't do this, but when you come to us, we want a holistic view of who you are as an agency. We want to see that you understand who you are on some level, right? It's the bigger idea of understanding why you exist versus the what that you're selling kind of thing. And we really start from the brand out. So we say we're architects and builders of brands. What does that mean? Well, it means we'll help develop that brand, really kind of make it a cohesive thing that it understands what it is so you can then go out into the world and communicate that to others and make them really believe in that story, right? Of who you are and why you exist in the world. When it comes to telling that story, when it comes to the certain clients that we choose to work with that we'll take on, we want them to believe in that story too. We want them to put that value on the strength and the power of a brand and really be able to be willing to believe in it and use it as sort of your guiding light for other decisions that you make as you execute on campaigns, as you're running on social, as you're communicating with your community that you're trying to build up around you. You need to have that kind of guiding light in place. So that is the impetus for what drives a lot of our work and the kind of clients that we choose to do work for too, is to have that mentality and that willingness to let us in and let us be part of that when it comes to, we want to understand you so we can give you the sort of results that you're looking for and to really share in those wins with you as you go through. Because we know at the end of the day, we're kind of serving multiple masters here. It's you as a client. We want you to feel good about the work you're doing. We want you to be elevated in the position that you're in, but we also want to elevate your brand and create a community around it of other people that we know could identify with you. Their lives would be improved through that identification and that relationship that we could potentially build. So it all grows from there. And I think it's just a matter of finding clients that kind of align with that desire to have that relationship and that kind of transparency with who they're working for.
Not mean that you guys often say no a lot to clients because look, I come from the sales side and my sales approach has always been it's very different from the traditional approach where the traditional approach of sales is trying to get any client that you can. But that's why sales is this people don't trust salespeople and all that stuff. And so my approach has always been, hey, you're evaluating somebody as a client just as they're evaluating you as somebody who can provide a service for them. So if they don't align with your values, then you disqualify them and you don't work for them. And oftentimes, having been in sales for a long time, I think that there's those people that are just so close. It's, oh, I want to say yes to you, but there's just this nagging thing. So I'm curious, do you guys have this very specific, not just client, but type of client that you work with? Do you guys often have to disqualify people who don't meet those standards for you guys, or how does that work?
Sure. Yeah, it's obviously always hard to turn down work. That's like obviously a thing that you don't stay in business by turning down too much of it, but it's sort of like you hire based on certain kind, not just skill sets, you hire on who feels like they align with who you are as an agency, right? Like you want that teamwork. You asked, how do you work with ideas over egos? How do you work in such a collaborative environment? You hire to that, right? That's part of something that you incorporate when you meet people. You can kind of say, I think they get it. I think they would work well in how we operate. They're on board with it. And we're going to be able to do really good things together because they're willing to have that openness. They're willing to kind of share those values with us. And so we know in the future, you can kind of project yourself in the future and see how that's going to work in an effective, creative environment. And it's sort of the same approach to when you take on a client. You want to know that they share the same values in different parts of the process and that they trust in that process along with you. That's not saying that there isn't some give and take there, because that's, again, half the point of acknowledging that it's a relationship is knowing where those pain points are and what they need specifically, and then growing it from there. But I think it's the acknowledgement that, again, it's not about transaction. It's more about what are those needs? What are those bigger goals, and being open to exploring them together and kind of leaning into each other a little bit so we can both have a lot of success together in those endeavors, whether it's small or big, whatever the assignment is. We want to know that we're going to be able to work together and be speaking the same language when it comes to, again, valuing the brand, valuing how we're communicating, and then valuing the way things are presented visually too. It's all that stuff is wrapped up together. And just if you have any kind of disconnect there from the beginning, it doesn't bode necessarily well for what that relationship's going to look like. All it's going to be is a paycheck. And that doesn't excite anybody. That doesn't mean anything to anyone other than just purely transactional, which doesn't build anything.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the big thing for us when it comes to
Sure.
who we work with. We have some specialized areas of focus that we've gotten into, and I think some of that might be reflective of that approach to the work to some degree. We do a lot of higher ed, and I think those clients specifically have that similar kind of mentality of students with lots of different concerns and being able to speak to them authentically. Especially younger generations are a lot more in tune to the way brands are trying to sell them. So I think inherently they acknowledge and really kind of embrace the idea of this authentic kind of speaking and being open to collaboration and ideas. So some of that mentality, I think, has driven us into certain kinds of markets or certain kinds of clients to some degree. But overall, if you don't believe in those same sort of values that we do, you can kind of see where that relationship will be. And then you can make the call, is it worth the investment or not to work together? Because at the end of the day, if it's not, we don't feel like we'll be fulfilled by the relationship. You might not be fulfilled by the relationship because it's really not how we work. And we're not going to try to be something we're not, just like we wouldn't try to tell your brand to be something that it's not really genuinely either at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I like the approach there. It what stuff from the top down goes to your front line, which is your salespeople, to be like, hey, if they don't align with our values, then it's not going to be a good fit for us long term. And we were looking for long term clients, and you're right. I think agency world has been so transactional for so long, and it's really, I think, where the real money is made, but also where the real relationships are made with clients who stick around for a long time because they see you as a partner, right?
And when you can establish those partnerships too, I think from the creative side, that's when you start getting more of the fulfilling work too, because there's more trust built up there with that acknowledgement. There's greater trust that happens. And same internally, when your team has more trust in each other, there's not like this idea of trying to outdo each other. It's more about trying to build on each other's ideas. It's a lot more fun. You feel the game that's in it, right? You can feel that there's a little bit more of this willingness to put yourself out there and do something that's really going to have a higher impact versus kind of constricting yourself. You feel like you're constantly expanding or doing more. So that's, again, everybody feels better about the work too out of that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so last question, Ben. When it comes to building a brand that captivates, resonates, and inspires belief, which is what you said, what elements do you consider essential, especially in today's fast changing marketing landscape?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think it's about making sure and acknowledging that your brand is a dynamic thing. It's about, I guess it's two things. It's about acknowledging that you need to be dynamic because that's the culture that we're in is very dynamic. The things that people value, the concerns they have, all those things are always changing. What's important is understanding who you are and what sort of need you can address as a brand and then really owning it and being authentic to it and not trying to fit in where you don't, because that's where you can build yourself a community that's really loyal to you and can grow with you over time.
Yeah.
And that's a big main thing. I think the other thing is to incite and drive any kind of audience to some kind of action. You need to be able to be willing to see that landscape that we're living in and then identify not just how to speak authentically to a message that we have, but how to break out with that message. And that's a number of things you can do to achieve that, whether it's coming across through a concept that needs to be authentic, but at the same time has some kind of breakout element to draw more attention, to get more eyes. We've done some Google training in the past, and some of the big learnings we've taken away from that, especially when you're marketing digitally or socially, is the idea of everything needs to be high, bright, and tight. As far as you create things to garner attention, all creative that have high impact. It's almost like making a chili or something for a chili competition. It should be a little hotter than it probably needs to be. It should be a little sweeter than it needs to be, because depending on what the goal is, you need to grab that attention and then leave a lasting impression, because it's quick little hits that'll then keep them coming back for more. And I think that's the big thing. Once you know who you are, who your audience is, then it's just all about identifying where those sort of gaps are, what's being shared with them, and what you can adjust your messaging to address and evolve over time with them to reflect those needs.
Well, this has been awesome, Ben. I love learning about Geile. I'm probably sure you guys figured this out way early on, but after 35 years, you really know what you're about, which is awesome. Where can people learn more about you? Where can people learn more about your agency?
Sure. So online, we're guileon.com. You can check it out. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, pretty much any of the channels. We're there. So check us out. But yeah, that's long and short of it. If you're on the hill in St. Louis somewhere, stop by. We'll go grab lunch, just play a good food around.
Well, thank you so much for being on, Ben.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.